Hi, I wanted to talk today about realism and what we mean by that and the different methods of achieving it and the different styles that represent what we call realism or representational art. And that ties into what I would also call the mystery of the language of brushstrokes, which developed over hundreds of years. So for me, if you look at the history of art, anything before the sort of 1700s was mostly attempting to be flat with no evidence of the tool marks that make the images, no brush strokes, etc., or whatever methods they were using, such as frescoes and stuff like that. And that style of art, to me, I consider to be very much illustration, and was more achieved by using the sort of hair type brushes, sable brushes, very soft brushes, where you could lose the brush strokes and you focused on representing almost every detail within the image or scene. And we painted like that for hundreds of years, it would seem to me. But somewhere along the line, and it's difficult to know where, when and how this happened, we see by the sort of the 1800s, well actually no, before that as well actually, going back to Rembrandt and Velasquez, all of the great, the Dutch masters, so to speak, we think of them as being highly realistic representational paintings, which they are. But the thing is that they are meant to be seen from a distance. So from across a room, they have a photographic realism to them. And then as you get up very, very close, you start to see the brushwork. And what developed over time, very strange, was this language of brushwork. And that to me is what separates a painter from an illustrator. Illustration is very flat. Paintings that are basically illustrations are very, very flat, and it's all about just the very technical visual representation is what they're trying to achieve, an exact copy of what the eyes see. But the thing is we don't actually look at the world like that. When we look around the world, we focus on single points, everything else becomes blurry. It's very difficult to actually paint a painting that represents how we actually view the world and see the world, although it can be an interesting exercise to attempt that. So over time, this language of brushstrokes developed, and by the time you had the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, and then later the Impressionists, this language of brushstrokes, literally brushstrokes as almost an alphabet of brushstrokes, you could say, but it's kind of infinite. And I think the Impressionists really ran with that, although having studied painting, as far as I'm concerned, nearly all representational painting, going all the way back to Rembrandt and those guys, it's all Impressionism. When you get up close, they weren't doing exact copies of all the details of the face and the cloth and that. They were hinting at what was there. And what they had discovered, or what we now know, what developed over time, is that you allow the viewer's brain to fill in the gaps. You can actually make very rough, jagged brush strokes with thick paint, but from back there on the other side of the room, at a distance, it can have a photographic, realistic quality. And for me, that's exactly what I'm looking for. As a painter, I actually want to be able to see the paint, and the closer I get, the less sense it makes. Some great examples of that would be someone like John Singer Sargent, or Alfred Munnings, and there's lots of others where up close every single part of the painting is abstract. You can't even tell what it is. You can go up and look at a hand that you can see from the other side of the room. It's a hand holding a feather or something. By the time you've got up close, it's just a series of abstract marks representing the light and shadow that can be seen, rather than trying to depict every single finger and the lines in the knuckles and that. But from a distance, the viewer sees those things because of the skill of these artists of just using paint very, very loosely. But they're really looking, so they can see when the perfect brushstroke is representing something visually. And that's not the same as modelling the object in paint and trying to make it three-dimensional, because that wouldn't work anyway, because if I want to represent a stone that's lying on the ground physically in paint, well, the painting is going to end up is vertical, so the light isn't going to hit that piece of paint in the same way it's hitting a stone, etc. So the great artists figured out, how just a smudge, a smear, a blob of paint, if you just stop, stand back and look at it, and don't be tempted to blend or fiddle with it or try and get too detailed, it's there. The brain reads it all in for you. It reads that information in for you. Another great example would be someone like Turner. And Turner did incredibly detailed, complex, large drawings. His drawings are unbelievably detailed and complex, including arches that go on forever, and his perspective was fantastic. And his paintings, likewise, very large and very detailed. And some are actually very detailed illustrations of a whole scene. But his paintings, when you get up close to his paintings, they become completely abstract. You cannot tell what anything in the painting is. If you go up and look at it, it just looks like paint. He would even use his fingers if they produced the right mark that he wanted. If using his fingers could make it look like a crowd of people on a beach, their heads, that's what, just smudge with his fingers and left it at that. But obviously he knows exactly what he's doing, and he's really looking. It's all about looking. And I think that's why most people want to draw and paint or sculpt or do whatever, is because they love looking at the world around them and they find it awe-inspiring and beautiful, and they would like, to represent that in any kind of way. Just, it doesn't matter if it doesn't even matter if it's any good. That's kind of not the point. Because everyone is unique and individual, sees the world in their own way. So long as you just try and represent what you see, you're always going to be unique and original, because you already are. What was it? Yeah, Frank. Oh yes. So this idea that all art is, all painting in a sense is impressionism. All representational art, painting is impressionism. It's just a question of degree. So you can see impressionism in Rembrandt and Turner and the old masters even. Like I say, you can't go back too far, because you do reach that point where they were just losing the brushstrokes altogether. But I would say that the logical conclusion of impressionism would be the painters like Lucian Freud, and even more so Frank Albach, where they force you to see the paint first. You kind of almost, other than from a distance, from a distance you do see the image, but you don't have to get very close before you just start seeing the paint. And the closer you get, all you can see is paint on top of paint, smudged into other paint, interacting with the paint around it. And again, you can't tell what, you can look at a piece of paint in a Lucian Freud portrait, you don't know where on the face that piece of paint belongs up close. It's just an abstract piece of paint. Very interesting artist that I think kind of ran with that idea in a way, Chuck Close, who when he first came onto the art world did very, very highly realistic photographic paintings, very large as well. But later in life he developed this technique where he would take a piece of gridded clear plastic, just with grids on it, put it on a photograph of a portrait of someone's face, but then if he turned it 45 degrees, now all those squares are diamonds, And the reason he did that is you can't have, if you have grids, lines, then that messes with the brain and the eye, and we can only see the grids and lines. Once it's turned into 45-degree, then the brain, the eyes can kind of move around the image and not be stuck trying to read lines. So what he then did, if you've got your face and it's got a whole grid of tiny little diamonds all over it, inside each little diamond, he literally painted just abstract painting, just a swirl, a blob, a shape, but that matched tonally the colour values and the tonal values of what he could see inside that diamond on the photograph of someone's face, and then he just would fill in every single diamond. So you end up with a portrait that is made up of little abstract. Everyone is a little abstract diamond painting in its, by itself. Doesn't represent anything at all by itself. So that was, again, it's a very interesting way of how this thing about how all art is impressionism anyway, and how this is the other point. I might have rambled a bit here. This is the other point I wanted to make, is that all brushstrokes, all painting is abstract. Coloured gloop on a surface cannot in any sort of real physical tangible way represent the real physical tangible world that we see. So it's abstract in nature, and then again it's just a question of degree. What is the degree of abstraction of the sections where brushstrokes are intermingling, trying to represent what the eye and the brain visually sees? But all of these styles, no matter how abstract and how extreme they are representing realism, and often it's just a question of how far away you stand from them.